For years it stood without a thought. Nothing about it changed, year after year, and then one ordinary morning, with no warning and no visible cause, the whole thing came down at once. Think about how that looks from the outside. The day before, it stood exactly as it had a year before, as solid to every eye as ever. So you carry a simple trust, a thing that has held this long will go on holding. Nothing you could see had shifted. And yet between one ordinary day and the next, it went from standing to gone. So go back and look for the cause, the way you would expect to find it. Track the weight it carried, day by day, across the whole stretch. The line barely moves. The load on the last morning was no greater than the load a year before, or 5 years before. Whatever brought it down, it was not a sudden weight it had never met. The weight that finished it was ordinary. To see where it really comes from, build the thing in front of you. Picture it held up by a row of supports, several of them, each taking a share of the same steady weight. No single one carries it alone, and that is the point. Off to the side, keep one quiet measure. How many of those supports it could lose and still stand? At the start, it could lose a good many. Begin with it full and sound. Take one support away. The weight it was holding does not vanish, it passes to the others, spread among the many still standing, and not one of them feels it much. The structure does not move. To any eye, it looks exactly as it did. Lose a support, and the rest quietly take up its share. Early on, with so many to share it, losing one costs almost nothing. Now let them go, one at a time, the way they do. Each loss plays out the same. The weight it held spreads to those that remain, and the surface gives nothing away. Stand back, and the thing looks as sound as the day it was built. But each support that goes leaves fewer behind to carry the same weight, and the share each survivor holds creeps quietly upward. Nothing on the outside marks it. The calm is real, and it is thinning. Keep going, and the pace of it changes. With many supports gone, the few that remain each hold a far larger share than any did at the start. Now, when one of them gives, the weight that lands on its neighbors is heavier, and it brings the next one closer to giving too. The losses, once slow and far apart, begin to fall nearer together. Nothing about the weight has changed. What changed is how little is left to carry it. Step away from the surface and watch one measure instead, how much it could still afford to lose. At the start, that measure stood high, support after support to spare. Loss by loss it has fallen, the whole time the outside looked unchanged. That falling line is the story the calm was keeping. The steadiness you saw was never the structure being safe. It was the spare strength being spent, support by support, with no sign on the surface of how little now remained. Now it stands on the last of its supports, just enough to hold the steady weight on a calm day, and no more. There is nothing left to spare. Then an ordinary day arrives, the kind it had carried 1,000 times, no heavier than countless days before. One support gives under it, but this time there are no others waiting to take up the share, because there are no others. That weight passes to the next, and it gives, and its weight passes on, and there is nowhere for any of it to go. In a single moment, the whole thing folds and comes down. The weight that finished it was nothing the structure had not met and shrugged off 100 times. It met it now with nothing held back, and the whole of it came down at once. Look at what set the scale of that collapse, because it was not the day. That very same ordinary day, met early on, would have cost a single support and nothing more, the rest taking up its share. Met at the end, it brought the whole thing down. The day was the same both times. What differed was the structure behind it, how much it still had to give. Worn to its last support, the same structure meets the same ordinary day and comes down the same way, every time. Test it 2 ways. First, take that last ordinary day and swap it for any of the small loads it had borne for years. Worn to its last support, it comes down on any of them just the same. The particular day that finished it was never the cause. Now try to undo it. Set a single support back beneath the wreck, and the thing does not rise again. What came apart stays apart, and one support put back holds nothing. To have saved it, you would have needed to keep many supports standing, long before the day it fell. Pull the whole picture together. A structure on many supports, a steady weight shared among them, supports going one by one while the surface holds, and the day the last of the spare is gone, an ordinary load brings it all down. You have been watching a single quantity the whole time, how much the structure could afford to lose and still stand. That quantity is what we will call its margin. It is no hidden flaw and no single weak point, only the room a thing keeps between the weight it carries and the weight that would end it. Hold the two ways of watching together. Watch only the surface, and you see a thing standing sound for years, then coming down in a morning with no warning at all. Watch the spare strength instead, how much it could still lose, and you see it falling steadily toward nothing, the end plain in view long before it comes. One reading says all is well until the instant it is not. The other shows the ground given up the whole way down. The gap between them is why a sound thing can seem to fail without warning. Stay with the moment just before it falls. By then the thing looks as solid as it ever has, and a solid, silent structure is exactly what safety is supposed to look like. So it seems most sound at the very instant it stands closest to coming down. That soundness was never strength to spare. It was a thing worn to its last support, with nothing left to give. Nothing failed by chance, no freak load, no stroke of bad luck reached in from outside. The weight kept its ordinary, patient pace until there was nothing to meet it. The collapse was sudden. The erosion never was. Carry this back to where you began. A thing that has stood for years, the kind you would call safe without a second thought, no longer tells you it will stand tomorrow. How sound a thing looks says almost nothing about how much it has left to lose. So you stop reading the surface, which holds right up to the end, and start asking a harder question. Behind that steady face, how much has already quietly been given away? And the question quietly changes. Not, was that last day too much for it, but how much the thing had already lost before the day came. You are not learning that all things are quietly coming apart, and you are not being told that every steady surface hides a ruin. Most structures stand with plenty to spare and lose a support without coming near the edge. What you learn to read is the spare strength, telling a thing worn to its last support from a sound one that could lose a dozen and never feel it. Let the whole picture stand. The steady weight, unchanged from the start. The supports going one by one, each loss quietly absorbed. The spare strength falling while the surface held. The ordinary day that arrived to find nothing left to take it. And the sudden fall that anyone watching the right measure would have seen approaching. Hold them together. A sound thing came down in a morning. Its strength was the room it kept to spare, and that was gone long before the morning came. A thing can stand for years on strength it is quietly spending, and come down the day, the last of it is gone. And a small trouble, left alone in a system, does not always stay the small thing it began as.